Hello and welcome to this week's video, looking at the landscape. In this second week, I want to look at the difference between the thumbnail, the sketch and the study, just so that you're able to understand clearly when I talk about those different types of drawing, the different levels of finish that they have, and the different methods that you would apply to each one of them. Specifically this week, we will look at, though, the sketch and approaches to how we would go about making marks and working our materials in such a way as to be able to produce a successful sketch. The first type of drawing that we want to look at is the thumbnail. These are usually very small and record the broadest impressions of the landscape. They're often used to get a sense of placement of the big shapes and the strongest light and dark contrasts. The thumbnail is a device for conceptualizing. They're done quickly and they are an incomplete drawing. The next type of drawing that I want to look at is the study. This is usually a more detailed drawing in preparation for a final work. It has a higher level of finish, resolving tonal masses, edges and colours, and can incorporate some of the details from the thumbnails and sketches. The study is where things might be moved, deleted, or added for the sake of a more resolved composition. There can be many studies completed before a final work. Studies can be regarded now as finished works in their own right. When we think about the Impressionists or artists like Clarice Beckett, their work was often criticised for being more like a study than a finished work. And finally, the sketch. The sketch has more detail than a thumbnail. It's about mark making, and that's the most important thing to remember when you begin this week's exercise. You're still information gathering with the sketch. You're making marks in directions that indicate form, that indicate growth, but also tell things about the sun and the direction from which it's coming. So it's still about careful observation. Gesture, texture, direction, edge are all being observed in the sketch. It is an incomplete drawing though, and so often will be seen as a vignette. It doesn't sit within the structure of a golden section, rectangle or outside lines. It grows as where it needs to be. The sketch is loose, spontaneity is important, and it isn't precise. Our first step in creating a variety of different marks is that we're actually going to change our pencil. Normally we sharpen it with either a pencil sharpener or even a blade into a fine point like this, and use it in a number of ways, either on the point or as it blunts slightly. We start to maybe use it on its side and do things like that. But we can change our pencil completely by using a blade and sharpening it in a different way to create like a chisel. So our pencils are shaped in a hexagon. So what I'm doing is I'm using one of those flat sides and keeping my blade in line with that flat side and shaving that nice and flat. like so. The lead's broken. Let that just fall out. Takes a little bit of practice, this. So we're keeping with one of those sides is giving us that. I'm just taking that out. And then we're going to turn the pencil completely over and shave the other side. So that's nice and flat. So the two sides are chiseled and flattened. Like so. So it'll start to look something like that. You can then just take off, and here you just have to be very gentle and just down to the graphite. Don't take too much more than the graphite off. Just use the blade very carefully. And we should have something a bit like that. Then you've got it all nice and clear, so just gently using both sides just to get a little bit more of that graphite off so it's nice and flat. And you've now sharpened the pencil into a nice chisel shape. So it's quite flat. There we are. You can see it's quite flat, a little bit out of whack there, and then it's widened again. So we can get a much wider variety of mark making now that that pencil is working like that. Now that we've got your 6B pencil sharpened into this chisel form, we want to think about making some different marks, and how now with the pencil in this chisel sharpening way that we've sharpened it, I should say, that we can quite easily be making a mark and varying that mark. Again, working with a 6B pencil is that you're going to have a little bit more control over tonal variations of the marks as well. Hold that pencil. Again, we're drawing, we're sketching, we're not writing. So be holding that pencil either in the underhand way and down towards the tip, or if you are going to hold it in the overhand way, right at the end. If the pencil's getting a bit shorter, maybe put a pencil extender on it so that it keeps you loose, that you're able to just work your way around shapes with these marks. Remember, as I say in many of my classes, there are no real lines in nature. So we're making lines here for the purpose of speed for these drawings, these sketches. So what we're doing is a kind of visual shorthand by using the line. It's a convenient way of making marks on the page. But yet, as I said before, we're not just using lines just ordinary that don't vary or change. We want to be able, those lines, to have some variance. So by, as I said, sharpening the pencil like that, even a simple line like that, just by twisting it starts to have a little bit more variance. We can then start to combine that with pressing lighter and heavier as well. and we start to get a lot more variety. Let's start to think about some of our jagged marks that we could be making. Think about moving the pencil as if you're making W's. And again, varying the mark. Here I'm keeping the W's of even size, in that they're of even height. But we could be also making those W's that they vary in height. And by changing the pressure as well. W marks. If we go the other way and think about that we're making N's, oops, went into W's there. And we get variation there. Again, by varying the height, we get another type of variation too. We then have the Z strokes that we could be making. So these of course go in a variety of different ways. Backwards and forwards, zigzagging, and again twisting and turning the mark, or turning the pencil, gives variety to the mark, as well as if we change the size of the Z's and the weight of the marks that we make, we get a greater variety there too. We can be using this pencil, now that it's in its chisel form, for making a variety of just individual marks as well. So by using it on the flat, for instance, we can be making wider marks. And again, these could be, by changing the pressure, varied in tone, and you could have a variety of different pressures and weights. By turning it on its side, we get a different type of mark. And again, varying the pressure, we can get lighter and darker textures and tones. What becomes interesting with any of these is once we then also that we can start to repeat them. And of course there's other types of marks, and I want you on a page to further explore. A good way is thinking about either shapes of letters, of making them continuous letters, like W's and M's, etc., Z's. But you can be making any kind of, and I mean with this chiseled pencil like this, changing directions like that gives variety to the mark, like so. What becomes interesting about any of these marks is as soon as you start to repeat them, as we were doing in these ones here, they have a textural build-up that can also be very useful. So for this week's exercise, I want you to attempt some sketching. Thinking about mark making, using that chiselled pencil to make a variety of different marks, light, dark, whatever marks that feel appropriate for what you're looking at and what you're doing at that moment. I would encourage you, if you can, to go outdoors and do some of this sketching. But maybe as a starting point, and like I have done here in this example, start with a photograph of a landscape that you have taken, simply just to get you thinking about the different mark making or the different types of sketching that you could do. I'll finish here with some photographs from a sketchbook by the artist Alison Taylor. Some of you have seen these sketchbooks maybe in reality. And showing you some of her sketches that she made over a number of years. She was an English artist, and she did a lot of landscape sketching, and they're very informative in her way of using the pencil heavier and lighter to just describe different parts of the landscape, and the variety of mark making that she was able to achieve. As always, I look forward to seeing you in the Zooms. Good luck with this week's exercise, and I'll see you soon.